Until I mastered pricing, I stayed poor. And once I understood these 15 secrets, I got rich. I'm here today to break down how you can command and get the highest prices with these 15 secrets. Secret number one, higher prices, higher perception of value. Value is judged by two things, perception and actual value. And people can only make first-time purchases based on perception. They don't know you. They ain't know what the experience is like. So they have to judge based the cover of the book, essentially. And one of the ways in which they say, wow, this must be good, is because it's more expensive than everything else. So marketers think customers are like, oh my God, it's a really high price. And that can happen, but usually customers say, oh, that's a really high price. I better look at that because maybe there's something here. So merely having a higher price commands more attention because people will automatically assume there might be more value here. Number two, people assume when you increase your prices that you will decrease your conversion, and that is simply not true. I have a good story to illustrate this. I was in the Cayman Islands once with a client, and I was begging him to raise his prices of $3,500, which was already the highest price in the market, to $5,000. And he says, okay, if I understand you, Jason, we will decrease conversion, but we will get more net profits because we have a higher margin. I said, maybe, but I said, the reality is one of three things will happen when you raise your price. One is the conversion will go down, that's true. Two is it will stay the same. And three is conversion will go up. And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, yes, it is possible that when you raise the price, more people will actually buy. And I had to break it down and explain it to him. I said, dude, listen, you've been at $3,500 for 3 years, yes? Yes, Jason. I said, how much have you increased the value of the product in those 3 years? And he's like, well, I added this to it, I did this to it, I put this in here, and I put that, and I go, exactly. I said, so your customers now that are considering you are not going to believe you. If you tell them you've made the product better, but you've kept the price the same, that's harder for them to believe than the increase in the pricing to justify the increase in the value that you added. And I said, oftentimes the least thing that happens is conversion goes down. Typically what happens is conversion stays the same, and in some instances, conversion goes up. So he put me to the test, and they went from their biggest launch of 12 million to $25 million. And they didn't get twice the amount of customers. They got a small portion of customers, only about 10 or 15%, but because they were making $1,500 extra per sale, that's where most of the launch increase came from. So raise your prices because the least likely thing that will happen is that conversion will go down. Number three, more margin equals more marketing. I'm sure you've heard of athletic greens if you've been on YouTube more than a minute, because it seems like every influencer out there is plugging this stuff. And a lot of people don't like it and they bash it and they say it's junk and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is you know it exists. And how do you know it exists? Because they have a large margin in which they can peel off a chunk of that and pay large amounts of monies to influencers to plug their stuff. Now, if their stuff was 20 or 30 bucks for a bottle or a box or a package of the thing, they couldn't get any influencer. And then you wouldn't know it existed. And you can't buy stuff you don't know exists. Customers would rather pay a little bit more for a good thing than a little less for a bad thing. They err on the side of overpaying as opposed to underpaying. And so therefore, if you raise your prices just so you can reach the people who need it most, they will be grateful to pay you more money for it, because the alternative is to have no solution whatsoever. Number four, less is easier to manage. So if you had 10 customers paying you $1,000, or you had 1,000 customers paying you $10, which scenario seems more chaotic to you? In the idea of managing and supporting a whole bunch of customers for a small amount of money, yeah, that doesn't fly. So I have a client, and his whole business is, how do I make $1 million a year without any employees? He's like, I don't want an office, I don't want employees, I want to screw around most of my day, but how do I still make $1 million net profit at the end of the day? And here's what he came up with. He goes, I need 10 clients to pay me $100,000 a year. And then he took 100,000 and divided it by 12. And what he says is, what I really need is 10 clients to pay me about $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000 a month. And then he went out and he said, if I only could sell and serve 10 people in my whole entire market, who would those 10 people be? He almost could speak their names. He got that clear on it. And he was able to get to $1 million quicker that way than any other way that he tried, because less is more. He only had to focus on the few clients and do backwards arithmetic. He said, this is how much money I want to make. How few clients do I need to make this money? And if you go through that arithmetic problem, you'll probably get stronger marketing and more success than if you do it the way most people do, where everybody is my customer. If everybody's your customer, then nobody's your customer. Number 5, higher prices act as anchors. So whether you like this or not, there's a human flaw in our brain where before we make a decision, the very thing that precedes it largely influences the decision we make. And so if I show you $1 million thing, and then I show you a $5,000 thing, you say, whoa, that $5,000 thing's a deal, especially if it kind of looks almost exactly like the $1 million thing. But if I show you a $10 thing, and then I show you the $5,000 thing, you're like, ugh, that $5,000 thing is super expensive, even though it's the same exact thing. So if you have a high-priced offer, even if somebody says no to it, then the next offer you have underneath of it, they're more likely to say yes to it. Because they're like, well, I can't afford his expensive thing, but I like him and I want to do business with him, so I'll settle for the $1,000 thing. And maybe your $1,000 thing is twice as expensive of what the typical thing is in the market, but they don't look at it this way because you led with the $10,000 thing. Now, maybe you'll get it. I've had clients that I've advised to do this where they price a very high thing. We don't expect the customer to actually buy it, but then we expect them to buy the second thing that we follow up with. And then we're pleasantly surprised where half the time they end up buying the high ticket thing in the first place. But when they say no, we follow up with the next thing, which is still twice as expensive as the competitors. And now they really buy it like crazy because they wish they could afford the more expensive thing. They can't, so they're looking for us to give them something that they can afford. So higher prices, better anchors. 6, charging higher prices is 2 things, psychological plus technique. And it's mostly psychological. The reason why people don't sell at higher prices is they're afraid to ask for them. Customers are quicker to want to buy at higher prices than you are quicker to sell them at higher prices. So you have to become confident that you are worth it. How do you get confidence? 2 things. You practice technique. You drill technique until you can do it like tying your shoes. And then you also just practice asking for the order. So technique could be like this. Hey, it's $10,000. And the customer then would say, it costs too much. And then you could say, how much is too much? And that's a technique. And then you could work on that. Or you could do one of my favorite techniques where you say it's $10,000 and they say it's expensive. And then you say, yeah, it is expensive. Do you still want to buy it anyway? And by the way, that works more often than you would believe. And that's just technique. Once you have technique, then you have confidence. And the other thing is if you just practice, it could be with your dog, your cat, it could be in the mirror. If you just practice asking for the order at higher prices, then you get confident because you've done it 100, 200 times, even if it wasn't live. So when you then do it live, it feels second nature to you. Your limitation of higher prices is almost always between the ears. The customers will often tell you, finally, I'm surprised you didn't already raise your prices sooner than this. And I have too many clients to count who have reported that very thing to me. So psychology, get the confidence. Confidence comes from technique. Number 7, you got it backwards. Product creators think, I'll create more value, then I'll charge higher prices. The reality is you start with, let me charge higher prices. And now that I have higher prices, here's how much more value that I can add to the product itself. In fact, I beg clients all the time to do this exercise. The exercise goes like this. If price were not a concern and you could deliver the best solution ever seen on planet Earth, what would go in that solution? And they say, well, I'd have a private butler that would show up on their door, and I would fly them to the moon and back to get a rare, organic compound that they could swallow that would make them 10 feet taller. And then we say, okay, well, none of that's actually practical. But what can we kind of get close to that? And then we take away, then we take away, then we take away. And what we're left with is like our statue of David that we removed from the block. We have this most valuable thing because we started at the top with value and then we brought it to reality. Here's how most product creators do it. They start at the bottom. Well, we can only charge this much for it. So how do we get to that limit? And they start with adding things, but they start with limited thinking. We start with unlimited thinking. If price weren't a concern, what is everything in the world we could put in the thing? Now that we know all of the awesome stuff we could package in there, now what can we remove that would have the least impact? And what we're left with is an offer better than anybody's seen. So even though it's higher priced, it's the best damn value on the market. Number 8, discounts are more meaningful at higher prices. If you sell like a $4 cheap ass ebook, and you discount it by 50%, whoop-de-doo, you save $2. Nobody cares about $2. But if you have a $4,000 offer and you discount it by 50%, that's a $2,000 savings. Oh my God, what an unbelievable deal. So if a higher price is just designed so you can give a bigger discount, hey, I'm all for it. And it's funny because consumers know that marketers do this. And even though they know, it doesn't affect conversions, because it doesn't matter if you logically understand it or not. Emotionally, people always get excited for huge amounts of savings. So if you have a higher price to then just discount it back to a normal price, that's more advantageous than just leading with a normal price in the first place. Number 9, niche the offer first, then go wide. So all of pricing economically is based on supply and demand. So the more demand is for the thing and the less supply there is of it, the more people are willing to pay. So water in a garden hose, that's what I drank when I was a kid. I'd ride around on the bike, I'd come home, sip from the hose, and then ride out some more. I don't know how I didn't die. Because these days, it's got to be the pristine water from the Himalayan mountains, and I pay $15 a bottle because, I live in LA, so of course we got to spend $15 on water. And the reality of this is, if you can start with a super targeted market where you're the only one giving them a specific solution, you can charge way higher prices because there is no alternatives. So supply and demand. Now here's where it gets fun. If you first charge really high prices to a small group, then when you go mass market, you can say, these people over here paid $10,000 for this thing. I'm going to offer it to you at $6,000. And they're like, oh my God, what a good deal. 2 reasons for that. One is people always like to get something over on somebody else. So I got it $4,000 cheaper than these people did over here. And so this is an easy way to get both, where you get that original audience to be exclusive, first of their kind, which is also a reason people will pay higher prices. And then you use that proof to get the rest to pay higher than normal market prices, and of course still get better value than they would from anybody else. Number 10. 7% of customers spend 70% of money in any given market. And what we always try to do with clients is, I said, if we had to ignore 93% of the people that you could potentially reach, we had to turn our back at them, we had to make marketing that would offend them and push them away, only so we could get to the 7% of the market, what would we do? And at first the clients have trouble with this because most good product creators want to serve everybody. But you know who needs it the most? The people who will pay for it the least. It's kind of like the most stressed people in the world. You say, brother, you need to take a break and you need to exercise. And they're like, I don't want to exercise. I'm too busy to exercise. Well, those who need to exercise the most. Poor people need to understand and get education about finances the most. But you know who spends the most money on financial education? Rich people. They're like, I got $1 billion. How do I make another $1 billion? And so the reality is we want to go after the 7% of the audience that spends 70% of its money. Now, here's a mistake a lot of people make with this. They assume only the affluent are part of that 7%. And in some cases, that's right. But in a lot of markets, we can always find people that are just overly passionate about that specific thing. So like in the anime market, people will pay $500 for these little dolls, or they'll pay like thousands and thousands of dollars for a Yu-Gi-Oh card or some ridiculous thing like that, even though they only make like $30,000 a year. They'll take all of their disposable income that they have left over after expenses, and they'll shove almost all of it into this one thing that they're very passionate about. So we want the irrationally passionate in that market. So you can make the product just 10% better and still charge 10 times as much. Number 11, it's all about differentiation. And so because we have higher prices, as I said before, we have more differentiation, but then we can invest more to differentiate. So if everybody else is blue, you can be red. If everybody else is tall, you can be short. But if everybody else is short, you can be tall. There's a lot of expense in being different. And first of all, that's a hard thing for people to do. They don't want to be different because then they're like, oh my God, now I'm weird because I don't fit in. Well, you want to stand out. You don't want to fit in. But secondly is you will have to spend a little bit more money to be different. But the key word is a little bit. Over and over and over again with clients, all we have to do is be 1 inch taller than everybody else and we stand out from the crowd. So we'll spend 10% more on the product than everybody else does, but we command 100% more power in the marketplace because we stand out. So higher prices allow you to stand out. When you stand out, you can serve more people. When you serve more people, you can make better products. When you make better products, you can charge even higher prices. Number 12, product quality is very loosely correlated to price. So people don't know up front if your product is better than somebody else's. And so if you think, well, if I have a better product, then I'll charge higher prices and duh, people will know my product's better and so they'll pay higher prices. In fact, that kind of thinking costs you significantly because then you skimp on the marketing. You say, well, my product is so good and therefore I'll charge higher, and then you don't do the marketing. And now you suck because people are like, okay, you're more expensive than everybody else, but you don't give me a reason why you're more expensive. So then I just think that you're greedy, and that's a problem. So in fact, it's harder to sell superior quality products at higher prices without superior marketing, because superior products typically take longer to explain. Superior products typically cost more to create. Superior products are different, and if people don't understand meaningful differences, then they don't want to take the effort and time to try to figure out why they should go with you versus someone else. Here's what I mean by this. You could be the same as everybody else in your market. Same quality, same delivery, same everything else. And if you charge higher prices, your customers will still get better results. Why? Expectation effect. If they pay more for the thing, they pay more attention to the thing. So the quality really doesn't have much to do with the price. So these are two different things. You got to work on them separately, but the reality is you can have average quality, still charge above average prices, and get better results. Number 13, as cost per acquisition goes up, who gets hurt the least? So if you're at the bottom of the market and you're operating on razor thin margins, if ad costs go up, you're done. You're the first to die in the market. Now, if you are at the top of the market in terms of pricing and ad costs go up, you don't like it. Nobody likes inflation, but the rich can handle inflation much better than the poor can handle inflation. So we want to be at the top of the market because prices always go up over time. Costs always go up over time. So we can most easily absorb these fluctuations in the market and not be out anything, and then have the time and the preparation to make the adjustments based on the inflation that occurs. So if you want to be in any position, be in the position that allows you to play the game the longest, and that's the high ticket position. Number 14, the more you can educate, the higher you can charge the price. Now here's why. Because the more informed purchasing decisions somebody can make, the better they feel about it. How do they know your thing is valuable? Education is the number one way that somebody can discern and understand, wow, he is better than the rest of the competition. We always put information in front of anything that we sell. I don't care what the thing is we sell. A better educated customer makes better purchasing decisions. And usually the cheapest stuff in the market is the dumbest stuff that they can buy. And come on, let's be real with each other. I know you, at one point in time, you skimped on something, you bought the cheap version of it, and you regretted it. Tell me I'm wrong, I know I'm right. Another time you bought something that made you squirm a little bit. You're like, damn, this is a lot of money. And you were forever grateful that you purchased it, because cost is something you pay for over and over again. Price is something you pay for once. So those cheap pair of shoes you wore 2 times and threw out, yeah, they were only $20. That was the price, but the cost was $10 per wear. Where those $2,000 pair of shoes that you wear all the time, even to this day, they continue to go down in cost each and every single time that you wear them. And number 15, we tend to get stuck at prices that we set a very long time ago. So the past you, maybe that made sense for you to charge that price. You didn't have the value you had today. You didn't have the success stories that you have today. Maybe you didn't increase the infrastructure like you've increased it now. And the confidence level has went up since when you first set the price once upon a time back in 1962, or whenever you set the price, which is typically a long time ago. So it's time for you to update your prices to reflect the current you, who you are now. Customers are ready to pay higher prices much quicker than you are to increase your prices. Over and over again, I ask clients when they do consulting with me, I said, how did you come up with that price? And they said, well, we just kind of pulled it out of thin air. And I said, great, you got the product out the door, you were successful with it. When was the last time you sat down and questioned whether that price was a reflection of the actual value they serve? And they go, we've never considered it. So I'm like, okay, cool. Now, by the way, do you want to do a test where we can make a whole bunch of money real quickly before we raise the price? And they say, yes, Jason, what's the test? And I say, you do this. You go back to your customers with this message. You can say, man, we've screwed up. We've kept this thing underpriced for far too long. A price increase is overdue. So we're planning to do an increase in price on this product on this particular date. However, because you're a loyal subscriber of mine, I'm going to give you one one last chance to take advantage of me, get in on a way underpriced value for this thing, and practically steal it from me before I increase the value to what it should be. And that might be the biggest promotion that you ever do in your life. So you get one last bite of the apple, one big payday, then you increase your prices, and then you make more money. So which of these 15 were your favorite? Put it in the chat. I'll see you in the next video.